could find such a love at our age. Whoever thought we could dance on a
Welcome to Couples Therapy in 7 Words. I'm your co-host, Judy Alexander, and I'm here with my husband, Dr. Bruce Chalmer.
Hello, Judy. Hello, viewers and listeners. Judy, what's today's title?
Derate the Hate, an interview with Wilk Wilkinson.
Yeah, we just finished that interview. I hate to, it's sort of like comparing our children, I hate to compare our children. We've done we've had wonderful guests. Mm-hmm. This one is one of the most important guests we've had.
Yes. The work that he's doing is just
super important.
God's work.
We interviewed him today. We happen to be doing this on March 7th, 2025. Yesterday, he was being interviewed for a PBS NewsHour sequence by Judy Woodruff with Dr. Francis Collins, who was the head of the NIH. And it's an inspiring story because Wilk Wilkinson had been very critical of the way the NIH was handling the pandemic.
Yep.
And Francis Collins was one of these people that the right-wing world was demonizing. And our guest, Wilk Wilkinson, is very much a Christian conservative and, comes more out of that world. And the way they have formed a friendship and now Wilk is part of Braver Angels, which is an incredibly important organization. Check out our interview and check out the resources that Wilk talks about.
And the Prohuman Foundation. I mean, he's finding a way to forge alliances and friendships with people all across different spectrums and ways that people can talk to each other. So, very inspiring.
It should be, I think, fairly clear to folks why we, as doing a podcast about couples therapy, would do this. Mm-hmm. But please tune into that. As I say, one of our most important interviews I think we've done. Before we get there, let's just briefly say, buy our books for crying out loud. Mention what they are?
Sure. Why don't we start with Betrayal and Forgiveness, How to Navigate the Turmoil and Learn to Trust Again.
That's my most recent book.
Right.
Which, of course, is talking about, how do you heal a breach? That's
Exactly.
what that's about. The book right before that.
Well, we talked a lot about ideas and ideology, and that comes up quite a bit in your second book. It's not about communication. Everything you know about couples therapy is wrong.
Yeah.
And so often ideas and ideology are what get in the ways of people having those interpersonal relationships and even being able to talk to each other.
Absolutely. When ideas harden into ideology, you can have good ideas and a diversity of ideas is great. When it hardens into ideology, people can't hear each other
Shuts down
anymore.
the conversation.
Absolutely. And then the book that, as you like to say, started it all.
Reigniting the Spark, Why Stable Relationships Lose Intimacy and How to Get It Back.
And that's a book that really expands on the 7 words of our podcast. And the 7 words are...
Be kind, don't panic, and have faith.
That's it. And then, of course, there is the book that you wrote, which is also, I wouldn't say it's about healing a breach, but it's about making the connection lovely. How's that?
That's a nice way to put it.
Yeah.
So that would be The Blue Tent, Erotic Tales from the Bible. I think that's something everybody can get behind, don't you?
Yes, indeed. Well, if you like explicit, and I do mean explicit, erotica, there's no pictures in it, but, explicit, beautifully explicit writing based on biblical characters. And it comes, and it's funny, I'm sort of at pains to say this in this particular interview because some of the folks watching this may be coming from sort of conservative religious backgrounds. Perhaps, I don't know. That may be true anyway. And, it may not be your cup of tea to imagine the characters of the Bible and their erotic lives. We are coming from a loving perspective. We are very much involved. We're religious, and we're very much involved in our Jewish religion. And so it's not coming from a mocking perspective in any way. It's
No,
a
not
very
at all.
deeply loving perspective. But if you're not into erotica, don't buy that book. If you are into erotica, do buy that book. It's a wonderful
Or
book.
if you'd like to enter into erotica and haven't read it before, it's actually a very nice introduction to erotica because there's nothing like really crazy kinky about it. So it's not like BDSM type of
No, it's
stuff.
not that. No.
Yeah.
There's some boundaries being pushed. I think. But we'll leave that to your readers to judge. Beautifully pushed.
You can always just Go on to the next story if one of them isn't your cup of tea.
Let's just say
It's 10 short stories. They're short.
It's
They're
not
fun to
all.
read.
It's not all within the bounds that some people would insist
Yeah,
upon.
well, if you're
in
reading
real life.
erotica, it's good erotica.
That's right. Absolutely.
And if you like the Bible, hey,
There you go.
it's a great way to make it very user friendly.
It sure is. And on that note, let's go to our interview,
Let's
and we'll see you on the other side.
Our guest today is Wilk Wilkinson. Wilk describes himself as a blue-collar sage, calming outrage and helping to navigate a world divided by FOG. That's fear, outrage, and grievance. A Christian conservative, Wilk has become a volunteer leader with Braver Angels, an organization devoted to bridging the partisan divide in our country by fostering civil and respectful conversations between people across the political spectrum. He is also on the board of the Prohuman Foundation, which aims to break through demonization and division. Wilk, welcome to Couples Therapy in 7 Words.
Well, Judy and Bruce, so thankful that you're having me on today. Thank you very much.
Well, we are delighted to have you. We always like to start off by asking our guests, how did you get into the work you do? Tell us something about your own journey.
Wow, my journey was a long one. I spent a lot of my time angry, had a lot of animus, a lot of anger from the way that I grew up, and found myself becoming more polarized and more toxic with the onset of the internet ecosystem that so much of us spend so much time in now, and just when I started to work on myself and figure out better ways for me not to be angry, I thought maybe I can take that take that to some other people, use a lot of the mistakes that I've made in my life to try and help other people that suffer from the same kind of anger and animosity and just ugliness that they have in their own lives. So I started this podcast and then as I did more episodes and became more familiar with different people and different things, the organization Braver Angels reached out to me, asked me, or a couple of their local ambassadors here in the state in that I live had reached out and asked if I'd like to learn about Braver Angels. So I had them on, and I signed up as a member that day, the same day that I had them on, because I just thought I said, oh wow, this is our country really needs this.
Mm.
This is this toxic polarization it definitely contributes to a lot of the anger and a lot of the hate that we see amongst individuals. And I'm like, this is in my wheelhouse. This is something that we can do something with. And as time went on, I just started devoting more and more of my time to combating this toxic polarization, these crazy binary divides that we find ourselves in, and it's become probably one of the most important things that I've ever done.
Mm.
It is a mission with intense purpose, because I know that if we continue on the same path that we're on, my kids are not going to live in a world as good as I grew up in. And that political polarization, even political polarization or any other kind of polarization,
Mhm.
any other kind of toxic polarization, let me clarify that, is just it's doing nobody any good. I mean, there are
Mm.
certain people that benefit from it, but it certainly isn't the people.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. We were talking about, gee, here we are. We're a podcast devoted to couples therapy. I'm the couples therapist. Judy is a retired educator, but she's like the real person, and I'm the therapist, as we often say. And but why are we inviting you onto a couples therapy thing? Except that, as we know, I've written about in the context of working with couples. I've written about the notion of, I don't think I've used the term toxic polarization, but it's basically that idea. I've written about, when good ideas harden into ideologies, they become caricatures of what they started out as.
That's right.
And that applies very much in the domain of working with people across individual differences. And of course, it applies in the country and the world as a whole as well. So, could you tell us, because I don't think we mentioned, yeah, I'm looking at our intro, we didn't mention the name of your podcast. And so if you could tell us about that. And the other thing I'm curious if you could talk about is your friendship with Dr. Francis Collins, which I just found fascinating. So if you could tell us.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'd be happy to. So the podcast that I do is called Derate the Hate. Derate the Hate, for people who like, want to break it down. Derate basically means to turn something down.
Mm.
I've been in the trucking and transportation industry for about 26 years now, and any truck driver that works in the industry now is familiar with a truck derating. And basically what that is when something so volatile within that truck is about to destroy the operating system or destroy the powertrain system of that truck. There's a mechanism in there by which the thing will turn itself down so that it can't destroy itself, or so that it's got the best chance of not destroying itself. So
Mm.
being in that industry and then wanting to turn down the hate and toxicity in this country, I started this Derate the Hate podcast. And then so my relationship with Dr. Francis Collins, which ironically is this week has been a wild week. I just flew out to DC to meet with him and film a thing with him for PBS yesterday. So I'm
Ah,
back at my home, but I was at his home yesterday. Um,
And I'm
Dr.
just going to
Francis.
pause and just explain to our viewers who Dr. Francis Collin is and listeners.
Oh, sure. Dr. Francis Collins is the former head of the National Institutes of Health.
Thank you.
He was the director of the National Institutes of Health for 12 years. Resigned that position or stepped down from that position in late 2021 during the pandemic, and then became the interim presidential science advisor for a while, and then continued to run a lab at the NIH until last Friday.
oh, wow.
Last Friday, for anybody keeping score, I don't know when this episode will come out, but yeah, last Friday was February 28th, and he stepped down.
2025, I'll mention just in case it's a different year.
February 2028, for people
Yeah.
um, who I apologize for that. February 28th, 2025. So if somebody's listening to this way down in the future, yeah, Francis Collins stepped down as a member of the or from his position running the lab at the NIH last Friday. Um, so obviously, with that being said, if he was heading the NIH for all those years, he was the head of the NIH during the when the COVID-19 pandemic started.
Hmm.
My relationship with him started in early 2022 because I had been somebody who had spoken out quite often about the government's response to the pandemic, of which he was obviously a part of. Um,
Spoken
and
out critically about it. It's just to
yeah,
clarify.
yeah,
Yeah.
I spoke critically about some of the things that he had actually done.
Mhm.
Um, and uh, and he approached the organization Braver Angels back in early 2020, saying, I have I have some blind spots here. There are things that I don't understand, how this response became so polarized, why so many people were hesitant to take the vaccine, and different things like that. But he recognized that there were some big blind spots in his way of seeing things, because he was kind of quite often kind of stuck in that DC Beltway bubble, um, and so he came to Braver Angels knowing that Braver Angels will often pair people of opposing ideas
Hmm.
and allow for them to interact on a contentious topic in a non-contentious way. And Braver Angels then asked me, being a blue collar guy from the Midwest, very much outside of Dr. Collins' bubble in Washington, D.C., asked me if I would be interested in having some conversations with him. And so we started this relationship, and we started having conversations, and we've had dozens and dozens of hours of conversation. and spent some time on stages together and things over the past, 3 years now. And yeah, it's been incredible. We still don't see eye to eye on many things associated with the pandemic and the government's response to the pandemic. But that being said, it's proof that people who do not see eye to eye on a particular thing or even many things can still, uh, you know, uh, can still interact in a non-contentious way and even build a friendship and even build a very good friendship.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
We don't have to allow our differences or differences of opinion to become a wall over which we can't at least be civil to each other, let alone, build a strong friendship.
How has your work with Braver Angels changed you personally?
Well, I think it's changed me in a big way. So again, part of my personal transformation was doing this podcast, or it's kind of you think about cause and effect and how things work, right? I mean, I've made more than my share of mistakes. I admit that over the course of my life. So I started this podcast hoping that by bringing some of my story out to the public that people could benefit from that. In doing so, in doing the interviews that I've done and doing the work that I've done with Braver Angels, I've had the opportunity to meet just some absolutely incredible people that I probably never would have otherwise met.
Mhm.
Certainly people outside of my own personal bubble, people that have helped me or helped reveal to me my different biases that we all have. I mean,
Mhm.
there's nobody, not there isn't one of us that can claim that we don't have any bias. But we often don't see our own biases unless we are actually speaking with people who don't have the same ones.
True.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah, we don't
so
even recognize them as biases
we
until
don't
you
even
encounter
recognize
people
them
who,
as biases quite
yeah.
often. Yeah, that's absolutely right, Bruce. We just don't we often don't know what we don't know.
Hmm.
And that's why it's so dangerous for us to end up in our own polarity bubbles, right?
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
we get stuck in our own silos, and then we just assume that everything that is within that silo is accurate, and then we become certain of those things that are in that silo, and then anything that falls outside of that silo is obviously wrong.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
that's kind of like the definition of bias, right?
Hmm.
We those things that aren't familiar to us become, or those people that aren't familiar to us become the them in the us versus them ugliness. And and then as my friend Monica Guzman from Braver Angels often says, those who are underrepresented in our life will be overrepresented in our minds and our imaginations.
Ah, well.
And all of that stuff that's happening in our minds and in our imaginations without actual interaction with those people, it's quite often wrong. It's
Hmm.
quite often wrong, but what it does is it helps to confirm the bias that we already had, and it builds that wall in between us and them. And as that wall builds, our ignorance of them becomes more. Ignorance leads to fear. Fear leads to anger. Anger leads to hate. And then, God forbid, it eventually leads to violence.
Yeah.
That is why this toxic polarity thing is so bad for us as a society, as a country, because as long as we keep them in that them category
Yeah.
and we don't interact with them and we don't do things with them, we end up building that, and it just stews within us. and
Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
and the ignorance grows, and with ignorance comes that fear, and it just follows that path. It happens
Yeah.
so often. So
It's interesting. I hadn't thought of this until this conversation, but that concept of toxic polarity, the word toxic, of course, is a really important part of it because there are polarities that are really kind of cool. I mean, heterosexual couples, there's a polarity there that they like, that we like. It's like there are polarities that are important. And I think even political polarities, the idea that there's a political spectrum makes, that kind of political diversity makes a country much more resilient.
Agreed.
But there need to be differences, there need to be even
Yes.
passionate differences. But the toxicity is when something about that, one of the things I often note, and I say actually, usually I say quite explicitly when I first meet a couple, and we're about 20 minutes into the first session, and I almost always say, well, I can already tell something about the two of you now that we're old buddies because I've known you for 20 minutes. Neither one of you is batshit crazy. And
Right.
I say that to almost every couple I meet because every once in a great while I have not said it because somebody's like having a psychotic break or something. It's like they are crazy. But usually people are not crazy, they're not stupid, and they're not evil. And
Hmm.
yet, what toxic polarity seems to do is casts everybody in the them category as all three of those things, or at
Hmm.
least some combination of those.
Yeah, that's where we fall into a big, big problem space, Bruce, is when we quit assuming that people are just wrong and then automatically go to they are evil.
Hmm.
They are dumb or they are evil. The the and that's one of those byproducts of toxic polarity, right? I you know, toxic polarization is the one problem. Another friend of mine, John Wood Jr. from Braver Angels, says this all the time. Toxic polarization is the one problem that ensures all other problems will not be solved.
Yeah, yeah,
You're right. You're so right in that you say polarity is needed. Uh, you know, a diversity of opinion, ideas, and thoughts and everything. That's always going to be very, very important. And I
yeah.
love the fact that you bring up the polarity that there is between men and women and how the differences in what men and women are build such a strong bond and build such a strong union. I think about, how different my wife and I are, but how great we are together.
Oh, I remember
Um,
learning in school when they taught us about sexual reproduction as a advantage for a species because it introduces diversity.
oh
It's,
yeah,
just that
absolutely.
concept of it makes the species way more able to handle, big changes when they happen.
No, that's absolutely right. That's absolutely right. It's a hugely important thing, but when you introduce that toxic polarity, or when you start to say that, well, them, we can't interact with them because they don't think like we do,
Yeah.
or we cannot allow that diversity of thought into our circle because then it somehow threatens what we have going here or what we're doing here. There's a great book out there called Think Again by Adam Grant, right? And he talks about the idea of, well, just the idea of if there is no diversity in ideas, it really prevents us from ever taking a second look at what our own thoughts and ideas are.
Mhm.
The importance of that cannot be overstated. It is hugely important to not just surround yourself with yes people and people who think like you do, but if you want to be able to think outside the box, you have to be around people that are going to challenge your ideas. I would also be remiss if I did not mention the fact that one of the great founders of the organization Braver Angels is a marriage counselor. Dr. Bill Doherty has worked at the
Oh,
University of Minnesota for
I know him through the work he does. Of course, he's well known among couples
he's well
therapists.
known in
Yeah.
couples therapy and
I
and
guess I
and a
did see that once. Yeah.
and a
Yeah.
lot of what he a lot of what Braver Angels is built on the philosophies that Dr. Doherty has brought to the table because I mean in a lot of ways these different things are dealt with in very similar ways that you would deal with very similar ways that you would deal with a couple that's dealing with you know polarity trauma, I guess if you want to call it that. I don't know what you all call it in the circles that you run
That's
in, but
that's I haven't heard that particular phrase, but it's a good one. Polarity trauma. I mean, often betrayal trauma is a big one, and I just released a book called Betrayal and Forgiveness last year.
very
But
nice.
that phenomenon of a couple losing sight of that commonality and that's, I think, what makes toxic polarity toxic, as we were already talking about, the things you're saying, when it turns into you other the people who think differently, and then ignorance leads to fear, and fear leads to anger, and anger leads to hate, and so on and so on. That happens within couples. They'll
Hmm.
often show up and they have no trust of each other at all. They
Right.
have difficulty seeing each other as people who are just coming from different perspectives and are hurt and fear different things. And so that freaks them out in different ways. And when they can learn about that, what I've often pointed out, the one thing the therapist can offer, and regardless of which of the many different techniques you've learned and schools of thought you come from, the one thing the therapist can offer is, I sum it up in the word faith. Faith that we're all basically valid human beings to be who we are to start
That's
with,
right.
and then we can work with it.
Hmm.
But just also, but getting back to something you said a few minutes ago about coming in contact with other ideas, but don't you find that some people find that threatening? That if it challenges their assumptions and breaks down their belief system, that some people might not be ready to hear it or want to hear it because it does turn everything around that their beliefs.
Oh, that's absolutely right. I mean, that's a phenomenal point, Judy, is anything that stands outside our own desire for confirmation and affirmation is considered by many, and to some degree, probably all, as a threat.
Mhm.
And so I often say, real learning happens outside of our comfort zone. I didn't make that up. I heard it from somebody, but real learning and real um, progression happens outside of our comfort zone, and people don't like to be uncomfortable.
Hmm.
It's one of the biggest problems with this internet ecosystem and things, this thing that we spend so much time in today is it is very, very easy to find confirmation online for whatever you want to believe, Judy.
Well, and the
I mean,
algorithms are designed to do that.
Right.
algorithms are
Yeah,
designed to do it.
yeah.
It is just absolutely astonishing. I said this in a PBS interview that I was doing yesterday, right? If if I get it in my head that somehow the symptoms that I have are telling me that I've got gallbladder cancer or something. I don't even know if gallbladder cancer is a thing. I'm sure it is. You can get cancer for just about anything,
Anything.
especially in
Right.
California. But anyways, the thing about that is if I decide in my head that I'm gonna have gallbladder cancer, I can find something online to affirm my position on
Yeah,
that. I can
yeah,
confirm everything I need to believe that I have whatever I think I have, you
yeah.
know? And that goes for everything. I'm not going to just talk about medical diagnosis,
Well,
but
conspiracy theories are all about that, basically.
yeah, I mean, we can find everything that we want to find, and that's another big problem that I talk about quite often is we as human beings, we as individuals seek out points of affirmation for that anything that we believe, right? So I know that y'all talked about self-love before, and I don't know how often you talk about it, but I know I've seen some stuff with you guys talking about self-love. If we love ourselves, if we believe in ourselves, if we want to succeed in life, we are going to find points of affirmation to promote that within our life.
Mm,
But if we believe that we are a victim, if we believe that we are a victim, the world is out to get us, I have to work twice as hard to have half as much as that person. We are going to seek out points of affirmation to find that every single day, and that is going to be what we focus on.
yeah,
Hmm.
And
yeah.
then
And
this
it's
little thing in the back of our brain called the reticular activating system is going to help us find those points of affirmation every single day. And we
yeah.
are going to start to focus on nothing but, because we can only focus on so many things at one time, we are going to start to focus on those things that keep us a victim, keep us in that victim class, and we are going to be our own worst enemy every single day, and we will do it subconsciously.
Mm. Yeah, and we'll of course find other people who will confirm that for us, and we can join together with and be victims together, and hate the people who are victimizing us, and then we're off and running.
Yep. Yep. It's a terrible, terrible cycle.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
And has your work with Derate the Hate and Better Angels, has that had an effect on your family and your in your personal life?
So, as far as the effect on my family, I mean, my wife, I've got probably one of the most understanding wives on the planet. I am truly blessed in that. But it does take quite a bit of my time. I'm very dedicated. I'm very mission driven. But we as a family understand why I do this. I do it
Mm-hmm.
for, I do it for our family. I do it for our children. I do it so that they will have a better world to live in that we live than what we're seeing today.
Mm,
Um, so the effect that it's had on my family, I think it makes me a better father, in the sense that I am a better person for the work that I'm doing in this space. But there are sacrifices that we make. I mean, obviously, this does take up quite a bit of my time. I still have a full-time regular career, plus I do podcasting and this mindset work, which is almost another full-time job trying to fix, in many ways, fix a country that I didn't break, but a country that I dearly, dearly love, and a country that I know my children have to continue on, and hopefully, there will be grandchildren and everything else at some point. So there are sacrifices, and my family sacrifices for it. Uh,
mhm.
but uh, but we know why I do it, and it's and I frankly I couldn't do it without my wife. I couldn't imagine trying to do it with anybody else. So I am a very, very blessed man.
It sounds she's very supportive of the ideas that you're putting forth too. It sounds like.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely, yeah, yep, yep.
Yeah, I've met it certainly in terms of couples therapy in the last 8, 10 years. There have been more and more, well, certainly since 2016, there've been, and that was right around the time I think Braver Angels was founded, as I recall. Right.
2016, yes, yep.
Yeah, and in that same time frame, for similar reasons, I've worked with lots of couples where one of the things that they have a really hard time with is the political difference between them.
That's right.
And where one person is on one end of things and the other's on the other, or they're just not close enough together, and it's really painful sometimes. And so I would think, just the existence of I've mentioned Braver Angels to numbers of couples along the way, since I've heard of it. And I would imagine that's, you're not only helping heal the country, you're helping heal a lot of couples as well.
Well, we'd certainly like to think so. I mean, I think that the same tools apply, the same strategies apply. Um, so, so yeah, like I said, Dr. Bill Doherty, one of the most amazing people I've had an opportunity to work with. He's an incredible guy. And uses like I said, a lot of those same principles that couples use in couples therapy. But yeah, we have seen. Um, we've all heard stories of, and some of us have actually encountered people who have experienced this themselves, situations where their political divide within their household becomes too much to bear, and they can't get beyond it because they allow the toxicity of things that are outside of their control to then overtake and control them.
Mm,
Mm,
One of the biggest things that I talk about is our ability as individuals to control how we react to things,
mhm,
especially things that are outside of our control. I just had this again. This is a conversation I have quite often, but it's a conversation that I had with somebody yesterday. Why anybody would want something, something that's happening in Washington with a politician that by rights shouldn't have anything to do with their personal life. The federal government. This I don't want to get off onto a political tangent, but should be a transparent force in the background of our life, in which we have an environment that we can succeed as individuals. Well, when we allow and we bring in that political. Uh, atmosphere into our personal lives, and we allow that to start then affecting our lives as individuals, when really it shouldn't have any effect on most people as an individual, unless unless you work for the federal government. But when we allow things that are outside of our control to then start dictating our actions as individuals, we start to invite in real problems into our life.
Yeah.
Allowing our political identity to become part of our personal identity, and then every time somebody says something that's in contrast to what we believe politically, we take it as a personal attack.
Yeah.
So now your neighbor, or God forbid your wife or your husband, says something that does not comport with what you believe politically, you take that as a personal attack. Now I can't be friends with you. You're
Yeah.
going into the other silo.
Yeah, that's what I've talked about in terms of ideas versus ideologies.
Yeah.
I am old enough to remember, because I'm 73. I remember the 1960 elections,
Hmm.
Kennedy versus Nixon, and my father voted for Nixon and my mother voted for Kennedy, and they just laughed about it. They said, "Oh, I guess we canceled out each other's vote." It was just
Guess we
sort of funny.
canceled each other's vote.
Yeah, and
What
it
do you
wasn't.
want for
Yeah,
dinner?
I was only 9 years old at the time, but my memory of the times, and extending past that for a while, well, at least another couple of elections maybe, it wasn't this tribal sense. It was, well, there's this party and there's that party, and they've got, you can have conversations about it rather than having it be grudge matches about it.
Hmm. Hmm.
And that, of course, has gone away. That certainly hasn't been true for the last 10 or 15 years anyway.
Yeah, and I think it started before that, but it's been steadily getting worse.
Yeah.
I mean, there used to be a time where we could turn on the television and we could look at something and we could tell that it was pretty much political theater, and then that these people are probably going out to dinner and having drinks afterwards, and
Oh,
you're like,
yeah.
boy,
Yeah.
we really got them good today, didn't we? What are you doing?
Well,
But
there's
now
James
now
Carville and Mary Madeline. You know that one.
yeah, yeah, there are a
That's the
couple,
classic.
they're diametrically opposed politically.
Yeah.
James Carville, the Raging Cajun, and his wife, she's a big time conservative, right? And
Yeah. Yeah.
and that's good stuff. And then you've got well, like I told you the story about how I came to Braver Angels. My good friends Rick and Barbara with Braver Angels. They are a couple who has devoted their life to public service, and she's more on the blue side of things. He's more on the red side of things, but they make it work.
Mm.
They've got a beautiful relationship there. We've known plenty of them, but you
Mhm.
have to be able to deal with it in the right way, and you have to be able to compartmentalize those different things. You've got to be able to compartmentalize those thoughts and understand that at the end of the day, it's not a matter of what divides us ideologically, but what brings us together in love and in bonding. So, but we've seen far too often. I mean, I've seen this personally with my eyes far too many times, where people will allow their political ideology to drive a wedge between them and somebody that they love, or
Mhm.
like family gatherings. And now we can't invite, Aunt Martha, because if we do, this is going to turn into a complete shit show, and
Mm-hmm.
it's just going to be uncomfortable for everybody. So now we got to kind of send out the invites on the down low so that she doesn't find out and come ruin the thing for everybody.
Yeah.
Those kind of things that is not the way that true civic engagement and true beauty of being parts of communities is supposed to work. If
Yeah.
we
Of
don't
course.
get back to, as a country, if we don't get back to a time where we can get together and do things together with people that we may not agree with politically, but we have that bond in our community that we are going to try to solve our common problems and recognize our common humanity and just live together in peace and harmony. If we don't figure out a way to do that again, it's going to continue to get worse, and it's not going to serve any of us well, and it
Yeah.
certainly isn't going to serve the next generation and the generation after that and the generation after that well. We
I,
have to figure out how to do that again.
I'm gonna guess you're probably familiar with Jonathan Haidt, with his work.
I am from,
Is
yep,
he,
yep.
yeah, is he part of Braver Angels? I was trying to remember if he had some relationship with them.
He is I don't think he's officially part of Braver Angels. He's certainly done stuff with Braver Angels before.
Mhm.
He's an incredible man. I've read a number of his books,
Yeah.
and yeah, the Coddling of the American Mind is actually one of my favorite books that I've read in recent times here.
Hmm.
But
I
but
was
yeah,
thinking especially The Righteous Mind is
The
a book,
Righteous
one of the
Mind,
books
yeah.
before the Coddling of the American Mind, where he just lays out these ways in which people all over the place who have these views that people in other groups find astonishingly, they can't make head or tail out of it. But if you look at moral foundations theory, it ends up making sense. It's like, oh, you're focusing on a different set of moral foundations, but we actually have a lot in common here. They
Hmm.
manifest different ways, but we have a lot in common, and I found his work really inspiring for that.
Yeah. No, and well, that, taking that to another level, another point is so often we lose sight of the fact that a lot of times we're all trying to get to the same destination. We just
Yeah.
Hmm.
have a different path of trying to get there.
Hmm.
But when you have different entities out there, you talked about in the intro, you talked about one of the things I talk about being navigating a world divided by fog, fear, outrage, and grievance. People in the media and people within our politics or our political atmosphere and stuff like that will use those methods of fear, outrage, and grievance to keep us divided instead of actually promoting the idea that you know, we have a common destination. We
Mm.
have things that we all want to see. We also have things that bind us together in a pro-human stance. We all want, food in our belly, a roof over our head, clean water to drink, clean air to breathe. We've got all these common things that we're starting with on a pro-human footing, and then we have a common destination that we want to get to here. Yeah, there's different curves and different nuances to the way that we would like to get there, but instead they use their positions of power often to promote fear, outrage, and grievance, and instead of promoting what could keep us together, they focus on all the things that drive us apart. That
Mm.
is a horrible thing that we face, but it's so important what you said there is we often have a common destination, or we often have many more things in common, things that could bring us together in unity, but so often people will focus on those things that they know can divide us, and it's very
Yeah.
unfortunate.
Yeah,
Yeah.
indeed. So, how can people get in touch with you? And also, I'm sort of curious what the PBS thing will be. If you can tell us, if you can tell us, like, when will that be on, and tell us about that.
So the PBS thing that's going to happen, and I don't know exactly when it's going to air. It should air sometime at the end of March here in 2025 on PBS NewsHour. They're doing a thing called America at a Crossroads. Judy Woodruff, she's a legend
Oh
in
yeah.
Hmm.
that space, obviously. So she interviewed me and Dr. Collins, and so they're putting together that as part of a bigger series of America at a Crossroads. That should happen and should air and then be available sometime towards the end of March 2025. How people can get a hold of me and find out more about the work that I do, obviously DerateTheHate.com. That's my podcast website. Wilksworld.com, Wilksopinion.com. That'll take you to different things. All of it primarily pushes towards the Derate the Hate podcast because
Hmm.
there will be ways to get all the content that I put out there. Also, I would encourage everybody to check out braverangels.org.
Mm.
Braver Angels, the largest grassroots movement working towards bridging political divides in this country, hugely important. And the thing about that is whatever your political stripes are, there's a home for you at Braver Angels as
Mhm.
long as you're willing to engage in a non-toxic way. We understand everybody has their blind spots, but not one of us is not worth talking to.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
so it's hugely important that all voices be heard. One of the things that I've also done with that organization is what started as the Working People's Project, but now we call it the We the People's Project. And that's where, people who are often spoken of but seldom spoken with get a
Mm.
chance at the podium, get a chance to talk, because one of the biggest problems and biggest and leading contributors to hate and divide in this country is the fact that people do not feel heard, they do not feel understood. So there is a place for you at Braver Angels. If you want to be heard and you want to truly listen to the other side and get to understanding what makes the other side tick,
Mm. Yep.
braverangels.org, great place to be, right? And then also my friends at the Prohuman Foundation, prohumanfoundation.org, just an incredible organization, headed up by Brian Bartney, Daryl Davis, Letitia Kim. Daryl Davis is an absolute icon. He's a superhero, a real life superhero in the racial divide space, and
Mm.
he has
Oh, he's
walked.
the guy who's met with the KKK.
That's absolutely right. Yep.
Yes, yes, I've
Yep,
read about him. Yeah.
he's a black man who is a boogie woogie blues and piano player from way back who decided, you know what, I'm just going to start talking to white supremacists and see what happens,
Yeah.
right?
Mm.
Yeah.
And so yeah, him and the folks at the Pro Human Foundation doing an incredible job in terms of promoting that pro-human stance, right?
Mm-hmm.
Let's focus on those things that bind us together as human beings instead of focusing on those things that divide us. Just doing incredible work as far as promoting education in that space. So, deratethehate.com, braverangels.org, Pro Human Foundation.
We'll put
Just
those in the notes for this episode.
Please do. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And like I said, a lot of incredible information. And if you're somebody who wants to see that toxic polarity come down in this country, see the hate come down in this country, we've got a place for you.
Great. Well, thank you. And thank you so much for the work that you do. And thank you for being on our show.
Thank you for doing this.
It's been a real pleasure. I'm very grateful. Thank you.
Great.
Welcome back. We hope that you found that interview with Wilk as inspiring as we did.
Absolutely. Do check out those resources that he has talked about. Buy our books and follow and subscribe to our podcast and rate us and all that kind of good stuff that
Like
people do.
us, tell your friends,
Yep.
all the good stuff. And if you yourself want to be on our program, or if you have a topic that you would like us to discuss, you can go to our website, ctn7.com. CT as in couples therapy, in 7, the numeral 7.com.
And when you go there, you can send us a message. You can even go to our calendar and sign up for a time for us to record an interview with you. And we'll be asking you, as part of that, what to interview you about. And that will help us decide, would you be a good guest? And you know what, as I keep saying, if you think you would be, you probably would
Probably
be.
will.
Worth a try. And so until next time,
Remember, be kind
don't panic.
and have faith.